Society for Lifestyle Medicine. Again, our detailed profile has all been shared with you. You can again log into our website to know more about Dr. Sheila Nambiar. And Dr. Ennapadam Krishnamurthy is the president of International Neuropsychiatric Association, and is also a leader, international academic leader in dementia, epilepsy, and number of other things, which is lifestyle diseases. Adjunct professor, Manipal University, Public Health Foundation, India. Is also advisor of T.S. Srinivasan Chair of NIMHANS, Bangalore. Is authored a number of books and is also a social impact leader in healthcare, founder of Buddhi Clinic chain offering integrated holistic brain and mind care. And today, at the end of the section, you can also join the Buddhi Clinic Mental Wellbeing Studio. To register, there's a number given to you, and you have to contact Mr. Vaidya. He will be facilitate you, take you in, and support you, so that you can go through the wonderful well-being studio, so you get to know more about your general well-being. And once again, very warm welcome to each one of you who have joined us this evening live on Zoom and all other social media portals. Now I'll hand over the session to Dr. Ennapadam Krishnamurthy to take it over to you. And we are looking for a very inspiring evening this evening, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Group Captain, for that very nice introduction. And I'd like to start by thanking our panelists for sharing their time with us today. Welcome, Professor Rishikesh Krishnan. Welcome, Dr. Sheila Nambiar. Without further ado, let me go into this topic. Effectively, mindfulness is today a multi-billion-dollar industry. And because so many of us spend so much of our time in the workplace, it's important that our workplaces are mindful too. And if I can put it very simply, mindfulness is being aware of oneself and aware of things around oneself without being judgmental or critical or having an emotional reaction to it. That really is what mindfulness is all about. Being able to be self-observant without being hypercritical. And of course, workplaces have challenges in this regard. And apart from mindfulness being important for mental health, fitness is a very important aspect, and good leadership is very important for workplaces to be mindful. And that's the reason why I thought it was important for us to talk to experts in fitness and leadership to try and understand how this can all converge on the occasion of World Mental Health Month. Hence, fitness and leadership for the mindful workplace, which we are discussing today. Let me start with Dr. Sheila Nambiar. Sheila, tell us your concept of fitness for the working individual, what it is in this decade of the third decade of the 21st century.
Thank you, Dr. Krishnamurthy, and thank you, MMA Captain Vijay Kumar, for the invitation. Fitness to me is not restricted only to physical fitness. It has to be, it involves everything from your mental, emotional, social. So it has to be a holistic concept. And yes, of course, physical fitness is very important. And we do know that physical fitness is important for various reasons, prevention of non-communicable disease being the top, one of the top reasons, like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, metabolic disease, etc. And exercise, we know, has very far-reaching positives, not just about weight. It's not just about keeping your weight within the norm, but also in terms of, especially in terms of your workspace, etc. Exercise is known to improve resilience to stress. We do know that workplace environment can be stressful, work can be stressful. So it improves, regular exercise improves our resilience to stress and obviously prevents other chronic diseases, including obesity. And we know that being obese in itself is a risk factor for not only for chronic disease, but also for performance in the workplace. Being obese has been found to have a deleterious effect on your performance. On the contrary, regular exercise improves everything from your mood, your level of positivity, optimism, improves your, lowers depression, anxiety, improves mental clarity, decision making, all these things which are all required for a healthy workplace. Now, in general, every person should be exercising, and the minimum requirement that's been given is just 30 minutes every day. So about 150 minutes. This is WHO standards, 150 minutes in a week, which is really not very much. And now this is for health reasons. In order to improve health, you just need about 30 minutes in a day. How much, how long, and what to do, of course, has to be highly personalized. And I can discuss about that a little later. But while physical exercise, as I've said, is extremely important, as Dr. Krishnamurthy said, the level of mindfulness that we bring to our workplace, and various mindfulness practices like your mindful meditation, etc., that becomes also very, very important, because you really need to be present in the moment for you to be able to perform well. Other things like your emotional and social intelligence, highly important in a workplace, because very rarely are you on your own. You're interacting with your team members, your boss, your colleagues, etc. So social and emotional intelligence also becomes very important, and a certain level of self-awareness, I think, by recognizing your strength, identifying your weaknesses. So all of these things come together to form a fit person. It's not just about physical fitness. And while physical fitness, as I said already, is extremely important to prevent disease and improve mental and physical well-being, we do need emotional and social fitness as well. So to me, that it's a combination of all of them that can be called as fitness.
Thank you. Professor Rishikesh, can you tell us, we live in very, very unusual times, and I think not just this generation, the last 3 generations have not witnessed a pandemic of this nature and social changes of this nature. What would you see as good corporate leadership at this time?
Well, I think the challenge for corporate leadership at this point of time is a not very unusual challenge, which is balancing the interests of different stakeholders. At a time like this, particularly when corporate performance is under pressure in many cases, the first temptation is to downsize, find ways of cutting costs that will keep, the performance at some reasonable level. And maybe it's difficult to resist temptation, but I think resist we must, because certainly one of the biggest challenges people are facing at this time is retaining their livelihood during the pandemic. So to me, the first challenge appears to be, how do you balance all these interests, particularly how do you keep your company going and also retain your people at the same time. I've been happy to see that many companies are looking at creative methods of doing that. Instead of laying off many people, companies are looking at perhaps reducing people's compensation across the board and retaining people. Many companies are looking at, maybe slightly higher pay cuts for the very well-paid top management, things like that. So that's a good thing to see. The second challenge at this time, of course, is to manage work from home, or if your workplace absolutely needs people to be there, managing this in a safe way. I think some reports already indicate that work from home is not as simple as it might appear to be at first. Most people, or I should say many people, don't have the most ideal home environment to work from. Further, in most cases today, you have multiple people working from home, kids trying to do their school and college classes, parents trying to do whatever they have to do in their occupation. And many homes are not designed for so many people working online at the same time. So I think getting work from home right is probably a second important imperative for most corporate leaderships. There is, of course, a tendency to be distrustful and to try and monitor what people are doing. And I've read lots of reports about companies trying to track what people are doing in the work from home context, which is again, doesn't sound very good at all. I mean, of course, one understands the need for productivity, but whether, tracking people's every movement or every minute is the best way of tracking productivity, that's another, I think, issue altogether. So in short, I think, the good leadership has to refrain from exploiting the situation. There might be a temptation, for example, to use this opportunity to, downsize in ways that you might have wanted to do earlier, but something might have stopped you, and instead you're using the pandemic as an excuse to do that. So I would imagine that refraining from exploiting the situation is again another, or should be another, top priority for good leadership in this context.
Thank you. Dr. Sheila, you have talked about the holistic concept of fitness, but often we also hear about lifestyle being important. So what is a good lifestyle for a working individual, and how do you think lifestyle is important for health and well-being?
So I'm going to address this from a lifestyle medicine perspective, Dr. Krishnamurthy. And in lifestyle medicine, we address the 6 main pillars of lifestyle. So this is for a working person and otherwise. And the 6 main pillars are exercise, diet, sleep, stress, relationships, and management of substance abuse. Okay, so these are the 6 main pillars. We've already talked about exercise. Diet comes very, very close, if not equal to exercise, because diet is extremely important when it comes to our health, when it comes to our mental and physical. And we know that, when we are working, whether it's at home or, rushing to office, diet always takes a back seat. There is a lot of compromise about, with how much is cooked, what is cooked, the vegetables, and, whatever is, it's usually eating on the run or eating in the canteen in the office. Now, of course, at home, women complain that, the family is at home and they're always ordering teas and coffees and wanting snacks all the time. So that's another issue. But diet is very, very important. And we know that what goes in is what influences our physical and mental health. We are seeing this pandemic with COVID, and we've already got a pandemic of obesity. India is a diabetic capital of the world, and that would primarily be because of our diet. And the Indian diet the problem with it is that it's replete with refined carbs and a very high fat percentage. So we tend to combine refined carbs with a whole lot of ghee and butter. And then, of course, now we have multiple other choices. In addition to our Indian food, we also have the choice of eating different kinds of food from restaurants and prepackaged foods and, store-bought food. So diet becomes very important, and you can either, like the old Hippocrates said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So you can either really treat yourself well, prevent disease, even reverse disease using diet, or you can set yourself up for various chronic diseases. So diet is primary. Then you have sleep. Now, sleep, we'll address it a little later, but sleep is very, very important. And I think we tend to underestimate the importance of sleep. What is advised is about 6 to 8 hours, but really it is the quality of sleep rather than the quantity that matters, because even one night of poor sleep can set you up for high blood sugar levels. It can set you up for depression. It can set you up for stress, not being able to manage because of the fatigue the next day. Obviously, productivity goes down and so on. 1 or 2 nights may not really make a difference, but I think consistently skipping on sleep would definitely be a problem. Stress is present for everybody. I mean, all of us face different levels of stress. I think it's how we respond to stress and how we are able to manage stress that is key. And there are many stress relieving as well as stress management practices like your MBSR and mindfulness meditation. Even exercise has been known to allay stress. So that's why exercise is so important, because it has so many myriad benefits. So stress management is extremely important, and we know that stress actually is a precursor to so many things besides diabetes, hypertension, obesity, even cancers have been, we've found that the real cause of it, the root cause of it, could be a stressful lifestyle. Social relationships, which is also a part of lifestyle medicine, which we rarely think about, even as physicians, we rarely think about asking the patient about her social relationships at home, a relationship with her husband or parents or in-laws. It just doesn't seem to fit in with our history taking. But we have found that toxic relationships at home can be highly detrimental to health. At the same time, authentic relationships, even if they are just few and far, one or two authentic relationships can be highly beneficial for mental health and translate into physical health as well. So social relationships are extremely important. And then, of course, you have the management of substance abuse, because even if you do everything right, you exercise and you eat well, you sleep well, you have great relationships, and then you have addictions, that kind of detracts from the whole thing. So these 6 pillars have to be managed. And by addictions, it could be anything. It could be cigarettes, alcohol, even food comes under the addiction category. So you could be addicted to food as well. So these 6 main pillars of lifestyle medicine need to be addressed. And I'm aware that, all of them may not be perfect at all times, but we do need to understand that some amount of attention needs to be paid to each one of these pillars.
Thank you. In fact, when we were in medical school, one of our professors of surgery used to teach us the risk factors for a gastric ulcer were hurry, worry, and curry. So you've kind of covered hurry, worry, and curry as continuing to be risk factors even today. I'm going to switch back to leadership now. Professor Hrishikesha, so much is thought about of leaders as strong men, people who are capable of taking major decisions. And even today, of course, many of our leaders in public life who seem to be in power epitomize that concept. And even the books like Jack Welch, it's a strong man leader. What is your thought about the corporate leader of today? Is it a strong man, or are we looking for a different kind of leader strategically?
So that's a good question, Dr. ESK. I think you're right that the traditional model of the leader has certainly been the decisive leader. I don't know whether Jack Welch is exactly the sort of exemplar of what you have in mind, but I generally get the drift. I think what's interesting in this whole leadership debate is that we've seen some kind of a transition in many of the large corporations. You take Microsoft, for example, the guy who succeeded Bill Gates was Steve Ballmer, was pretty much, by all reports, one of those hard-driving managers. And today we have our own Satya Nadella, who seems to have a very different, much more thoughtful, much more adaptive, much more kind of a human approach to leadership. And by all reports, he has been quite successful in, transforming or adapting Microsoft much better to the changing tech environment. In fact, it's quite amazing that at this point of time, we have several major tech companies, including Google and more recently IBM, which are led by CEOs of Indian origin. And once again, I don't know I don't know these individuals personally, though I do know one of them, but I don't know all of them personally. And all media reports suggest that, they're quite, sort of more, if not consensus oriented, at least believe in a lot of discussion, believe in taking people along with them, seem to be much more not at all in that kind of mode which you first described at the outset. In fact, there's a interesting discussion which is going on about the success of the Asian manager, and if not the Asian, in fact, maybe one should be more specific, success of the Indian manager. In fact, there's an interesting book which came out a couple of years ago, written by Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan, formerly of Tata Sons and Unilever, and Ranjan Banerjee, who's the dean of the SP Jain Institute in Mumbai, where they try to understand why these Indian managers are doing so well on the global stage. And they came to some interesting, though I would say probably slightly controversial conclusions. One thing they said is that Indians are very good at managing diversity because we by and large live in a pretty diverse environment. We have the fierce aspiration to do better, but at the same time maintaining some core values in place, which is what typically happens in the Indian middle class household from which most of these people came up. By and large have a fairly strong respect for the family, and by extension to the collective, which tends to sort of extend to the organization. Also come with some degree of frugality because, again, of the Indian tradition. And these folks have been able to transplant this quite well in the multinational corporation context. So there does seem to be a different model of management or leadership emerging, and it's good to see that this is being led or pioneered by some of our own compatriots who are doing extremely well globally. Arvind Krishna, who is the current CEO of IBM, was my hostel mate in IIT, and I saw not necessarily a close friend of mine, but I mean, I've seen him at fairly close quarters during my undergraduate years. And, a very decent guy. And I mean, certainly, I would imagine that he would be pretty good at embodying many of the qualities I just mentioned. So, yes, I mean, I don't know whether this is going to be necessarily the only style of leadership, but certainly there are alternate styles of leadership emerging. And the good news is that they are getting some buy-in globally as well.
So consensus building is an important quality in the 21st century workplace.
Even if not consensus building, at least not, top-down order giving. I mean, maybe consensus would be going a bit too far, but let's say more participative decision making. I think consensus might be taking things a bit far, but yeah.
Participative leadership. That brings me to physical fitness and mental health, Dr. Sheila. It's kind of easy to kind of imagine that someone who's physically fit enjoys good mental health as well. But that might just be a mirage, isn't it? So what are the links between these two entities?
Dr. Krishnamurthy, I think honestly, regular exercise being beneficial to physical health is only, I think that's just a very, very small part. Honestly, I think the psychological benefits of regular exercise far outweigh the physical. Because, like I said, mood elevation, stress relief, increased levels of self-confidence, alleviation of depression, anxiety, these things, these are the real benefits which keep people on the exercise wagon. Because very often you find that, when they when they start off exercising, saying they want to lose weight, for instance, that whole process takes a while. It doesn't happen overnight. And the thing that keeps them going, the thing that keeps them persisting with the exercise are the psychological benefits. And those just cannot be estimated. In fact, and then looking at the real, in fact, even when it comes to depression, almost 90% of the studies, as you know, show that exercise truly has an anxiolytic antidepressant effect. In fact, there was this study in the Netherlands, which I was reading recently, which found that following about 1,000 odd people, they found that the not just physical exercise, but also what they eat has huge psychological benefits. People who eat fast foods and large quantities of sweets are more prone to depression. So, exercise and food have a huge effect on our mental health, on our psychological health. And of course, the reasons for that is you have what's called as endorphins, which are bathing the cells when you exercise for a stipulated period of time over and above 20 minutes. And you also have what's called as BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which improves or increases the number of cells, neurons or the brain cells, and number of connections between the brain cells. And this happens now looking at the work environment, for instance, this BDNF seems to increase the size and the number of neurons in the hippocampus. Hippocampus is important for memory. And of course, that's important and related to work. And it also increases the cells in the prefrontal cortex, which is involved with decision making. So like I said, exercise is not just about weight. There is a lot of mental health benefits, psychological health benefits. And I think, one of the things that a regular exerciser knows is self-discipline. And that self-discipline, to get up every morning and to exercise, irrespective of whether it's raining or, you don't feel like it, and, you don't feel up to doing your 30-minute or 40-minute run or whatever it is, it takes a lot of self-discipline. And that translates into your work and into the rest of your life. Just like, 10 minutes of meditation translates into the rest of your life, 30 to 40 minutes of exercise does translate into the rest of your life. Then if you play a game, a sport, that, you inculcate the team spirit, you learn how to deal with defeat and failure, and, you learn to deal with it graciously. All these things can be translated into your work life. So I think fitness and exercise is really not about fitness, not about the physical alone. It's certainly not just about weight. And I know from both personal experience as well as dealing with clients and patients that what keeps people on the wagon is the psychological benefit more than anything else. Of course, it's great to see the scale going down, and it's great to see your, waist coming, the inches coming down. But I think the psychological benefits are far, far more important.
So a healthy body does lead to a healthy mind and a healthy brain.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Professor Rishikesha, let me ask you about this very important human quality of empathy. In neuroscience and psychology, there is a feeling that many effective leaders are effective because they lack empathy. They don't put themselves in your shoes, and therefore they're able to make hard decisions. How is that concept changing, especially with so many women leaders coming to the fore in many corporate workplaces? And what does your research tell you about the mind and leadership?
So it's a little bit, I just try to connect this to your earlier question as well on how leadership is changing. I read another interesting book some time ago called Mean Men by Mark Lipton. And one of the points this gentleman was making in his book was not only about how the leaders are hard driving like Jack Welch, but how many of them are just basically mean guys. They are a little related to the point you made just now about lacking empathy and so on. So he uses terms like toxic, raging, manipulative as some of the adjectives he uses to describe many of these people. So unfortunately, it does seem the case that there are quite a few such leaders in the world today. I don't want to take names, but at least if you look at the sort of things we see in the media, some anecdotal evidence, even some of the top sort of entrepreneur leaders leading some of the largest companies in the world today seem to have some of that streak. And one person even got pushed out of his job. I think it was the founder of Uber who got pushed out of his job. And one of the things against him was that he was quite mean and manipulative and all the rest. So this does seem to be a bit of a challenge. Of course, as you know only too well, one of the problems when women come into leadership role, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't call it a problem, but one of the phenomena we notice is that many times to get to that position, women think that they need to behave the same way the successful men leaders do. And in the process, maybe they suppress some of their own inherent empathy to instead mimic what the successful male leaders are doing. So just as we have these hard-charging men leaders, one does hear from time to time about hard-charging women leaders as well. So I'm just simply making the point that it's not necessarily the case that women leaders and empathy go together. And I'm sure if you think about it, you can realize quite a few examples. Again, these days I'm wary of taking people's names. I'm just worried somebody will beat me up or start trolling me on the internet or something like that. But I think if you look around, I'm sure, particularly in the state in which you are, you can find some good examples of such people who have been around in the recent past. So there are plenty of examples of such people. So the short answer to your question is I don't think that more women leaders necessarily means more empathy, though it could be the case. I'm actually increasingly of the view that some of these men leaders with empathy are actually doing quite well. I gave you some examples earlier, like Satya Nadella, I think is a good example. And so the good news is that, yes, empathy seems to be increasingly becoming an important factor. But whether that's necessarily because of women coming into leadership roles is a separate question.
Thank you. In fact, there's a comment in the chat box, hard from Balaraman Venkatraman. Hard driving leadership is understood now to be unsuitable, and inspirational, empathetic leadership accomplishes more, and agree that a woman leader is not necessarily empathetic.
Yeah, so, most of these organizational behavior professors and researchers have for a long time argued for some kind of a contingency theory of leadership, which essentially says it depends on the context in which you are a leader. So maybe, for example, in a certain context, maybe, something like emergency situation, you probably want somebody who can take quick decisions and just drive things from the top, maybe. But maybe in some other situation, maybe a turnaround or something like that, maybe you want somebody with greater empathy and people skills and so on. So essentially, I think there is it's a lot to do with the context, the organization, the type of industry, and so on. So broadly, I would agree with you. I think empathy is getting more space these days.
Thank you. Dr. Sheila, there's an interesting question in the chat box about quality of sleep and whether Fitbits are any good to measure sleep and sleep quality. A question from Raja. Do you have a view on this?
Yeah, they do. I'm not sure about Fitbit, but there are other pieces of probably Fitbit too, but there are other pieces of equipment that actually evaluate quality of sleep. Krish, but I'm not so sure how effectively they're able to measure that. In fact, there are even pieces of some sort of a gadget that you place under your mattress, which is supposed to evaluate the quality of your sleep. But like I said, I'm not sure how effectively that can be. I mean, I don't think it can be taken to be measuring your sleep as effectively as, let's say, in a sleep clinic. But by and large, I'm sure, it could evaluate your level of restlessness and pulse and things like that. But Fitbit is very effective to count steps and to, at least keep you on track as far as your activity levels go.
Thank you. In fact, there's we run a sleep lab in Buddhi Clinic, and it's an incredibly detailed assessment that is required, both clinical and otherwise, in order to determine what the problem of sleep really is for a given individual. And it's a whole night's recording that tells you whether the sleep quality is the problem. So I think you're absolutely right. The Fitbit might give you some basic data, and I do know that there's a portable device now, which is available that helps you track this. But that's more like a screening device. It's not diagnostic. So
Diagnostic. Yeah.
We spend so much of our time in the workplace. So what should workplaces do in order to improve our fitness and lifestyle, Dr. Sheila?
Yeah. So this is really not, it's more of a social problem than it's an individual problem as well. But I think it's also a social problem, because in a workplace, you can't make decisions that are solely beneficial only to you, and there are certain rules and regulations that need to be followed. So if the higher ups, if the management are also involved and invested in the employee health, then implementing fitness, allowing for fitness for the employees can be highly beneficial. But on an individual level, I think prioritizing exercise is the first thing, understanding that it is non-negotiable. So even if it is just 30 minutes a day, if it is non-negotiable, you will find the time to do it. And interestingly, I have found that the busiest people are the ones who manage to fit in exercise, because they are able to manage their time better probably. And so they manage to fit in the 30 minutes, and it doesn't have to be a one long stint of 30 minutes. You can even fit in 2 15-minute sessions, and that's good enough. But while at work, I think one of the major problems is the amount of time that we spend sitting down, as we are all doing now, and sitting for long periods of time is an independent risk factor for disease, for decreased longevity, and for a whole host of other problems. Just because you exercise 1 hour in a day does not circumvent or mitigate the problems that are caused by sitting. So it is important for us to understand that if we can break up our sitting, every 20 to 30 minutes by just getting up, moving around, walking, stretching, etc., it does help a lot. Then, of course, you have the standing desk, and you get some quite amazing ones these days. So having a standing desk and standing and working part of the time will help. Walking meetings, and then, of course, focusing on what you eat in the day also matters. The tendency is to snack a lot when you are at work, the numerous milky, sweet coffees and teas, and then what is served in the canteen becomes important. You'll also find that, if you post lunch or early afternoon, there is that slump in energy, and most people reach for that coffee or the tea, but you'll find that just walking briskly for about 10 to 15 minutes, even around the corridors or up and down the stairs, in and around your house, makes you much more alert than picking up that cup of coffee. And of course, other things like shift work, when you have meeting, you're dealing with companies across the globe, so you have shift work and you have to stay up late, looking at this computer, the screen, all of that is highly detrimental to our sleep health. But again, like I said, that's a social problem, because you're in a company that deals with another company across the globe. So, I'm not sure how to deal with that, but restricting screen time to at least an hour before sleep, and you do have these blue light, these glasses that actually prevent the blue light from the screens. They are said to be, I don't know, I'm not too familiar with them, but they are said to be useful to protect you from that blue light from the screen. Then, of course, encouraging things like, especially if the top level management is quite particular about employee well-being, and he himself is committed to fitness, and things like, organizing these fit group runs and having a fitness center in the building of your company, all of that does help to a large extent. But what I find is that it's the little things that matter. While your 30 minutes of exercise is important, it's the little things that you do through the day that really matter, because non-exercise activity is equally, if not more important than that 30 minute. Just like I said, 1 hour of exercise or 30 minutes of exercise does not negate the detrimental effects of sitting. It's the activity level that you manage to put in, even if it's just walking around the house, walking to the water cooler, using the stairs instead of the elevator. All those things matter. And it's these little things that actually make a difference between a person who tends to gain weight steadily and somebody who manages to maintain a healthy weight through his life and also maintain health. So it's these little things, and I think making those little changes through the day will make a difference to our health and fitness.
Thank you. In fact, one of our very humorous cardiologists, senior cardiologists in Chennai, who used to teach in the government hospital, always jokes that his department was on the 10th floor, and when he would arrive in the hospital, the liftman would say, "Vaanga sir, சீக்கிரம் மேல போயிடலாம்," and he'd say, "இல்ல, அதனால தான் நான் ஏறி போறேன் படியில." So he always used to climb the stairs and would never, he said he's never used the lift, and he proudly says that he's in his 70s and he's still climbing stairs. So in a sense, therefore, you can stay fit by doing little things rather than have to find that magic 45 minutes when you're on the treadmill. I think great points there. On the topic of schedules and fitness, Professor Rishikesha, we hear of these exemplary leaders who talk about waking up early, getting a lot accomplished early in the morning, and having a fairly rigid schedule to the day. Famously, G.D. Birla would refuse to attend any evening function, and even if he did, he would leave before 6:37, and he would only satisfy his guests by having a glass of milk there. So what is your concept of the importance of scheduling, planning, and early awakening as part of leadership today?
I think all those things are quite important. But incidentally, I haven't done any research on this. So what I'm telling you is more just my own view on the subject. At the risk of intruding into Dr. Nambiar's territory, I would sort of suspect that maintaining a good schedule with, routine and discipline and all that is actually quite useful. It gives you a lot more energy. It gives you a lot more stamina. Certainly, not attending parties helps you get better sleep. So, I mean, in general, I would imagine that many of the effective leaders actually follow pretty, sort of rigorous routines, including getting the at least half an hour or more of exercise into their routine. Of course, there are people who are enthused and energized by meeting other people, and all of us are, but some people more than others, let's say. So for them, maybe that social gathering can be a great source of energy. But I think whichever way you do it, you have to find a way of balancing and using your energy in the most effective way. And I think that's again something which is related to each individual and their metabolism and how they function and so on. I still remember when I first went to IIT, I was always somebody who went to sleep early. And then when I went to IIT, I found that most of my classmates used to stay up till 12, 1, 2, whatever it was, late at night. I could never do that. And I found that I was completely dysfunctional after about 11, 11:30. And if I stayed up, it just cost me the next day, because I would not only lose sleep, then I would also be tired the next day and I wouldn't be able to concentrate in the class and so on. So I think it depends, but my friends seem to do perfectly well. So it looks to me that everybody has their own pattern of doing things. But yes, to answer your question more specifically, I have a feeling that most of these successful leaders are highly disciplined people. Let me just give you one example. At IIM Bangalore, Dr. Devi Shetty is the chairman of our board. And so I've been interacting with him a fair bit in recent months. And I find he is extremely disciplined, which he has to be as a top cardiac surgeon with a lot of external engagements and so on. And he finds pretty efficient ways of communicating. For example, if I send him an email, his favorite mode of replying is a voice message. I think that's the simplest one for him to do. So even between surgeries, he can just quickly, without even having to key anything into a computer or a mobile, he can just quickly record lots of voice messages. And so, I mean, he's worked out all these very efficient ways of communicating and being effective at the same time.
Thank you. Very interesting question in the chat box. About ethics in today's business. And, the business environment doesn't necessarily support conventional ethical thought and action always. And does that prove to be a conflict for leaders? And does that make existence in the business workplace more difficult for people?
You're asking me that question?
Yes, as a follow-up to the last discussion.
Okay. So I think ethical dilemmas have always been a part of leadership. I'm not completely convinced that there's anything about the current era which makes those ethical dilemmas any more difficult or pointed than they were in the past. For sure, there's a lot of competition, which has been around for quite some time, and you have to be on your toes and continuously doing different things if you want to stay on top. But I'm not necessarily convinced that the ethical dilemmas or concerns of today are any more pointed or sharp than they were in the past. So maybe the person who asked that question should give us some examples or something more specific about why he or she thinks this ethical issues have become more challenging now. At least I don't see it.
As someone who works with brains and minds, I do know that when someone personally feels a matter of integrity or ethics is preoccupying them in their workplace or anywhere, it certainly does have an impact on their mental health. And it takes people a lot of adjustment to get over that. That's something that we often come across.
No, for sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, that would undoubtedly be true. But I think the question is, I can ask you that question. In fact, maybe we should start asking you some questions also. But I'll ask you that question. So do you see in your practice more people with mental health issues triggered by ethical concerns?
Interestingly, probably not more people. But yes, there are people I meet whose primary concerns, which are sort of compromising their mental health, stem from ethical reasons, ethical conflicts that they are perceiving either in their personal lives or in their workplace. In fact, one of my clients told me some time ago that, "Doc, I think I was born in the wrong decades. I should have been born and grown up in a slightly earlier time." And of course, we all have a rosier picture of the past, isn't it? I don't think the past was perfect, but we all have this, Simon and Garfunkel and so many things make us feel that the 60s and 70s were wonderful. So I think there's a bit of that as well. Couple of points. Dr. Rama points out that the post-lunch slump that we all experience is probably hyperglycemia. So the walking will work. High blood sugar levels after our meals, and therefore the walking might work. Dr. Sheila, a question for you in the chat box. Can a dreamless sleep be interpreted as a sound sleep? From Prakash Raman.
I'm not an expert on sleep, but I'm not sure if we all remember our dreams all the time. So it's hard to say if it was dreamless or not. I would imagine that, I don't think that a dreamful sleep is necessarily not a good sleep. Let me put it like that. I think a dreamless sleep just means that you don't remember your dreams. It doesn't mean that you didn't have them, So I think that would be my take on it.
You are an expert on dietary fads, and every day we are reading in the paper conflicting things. First they say chocolate is bad, then they say it is good. First they say coconut is bad, then they say it's good. First they say alcohol is bad, then they say a glass of red wine every day is good for you. So why don't you bust some of these myths for us? What should we be eating and drinking?
Yeah. Dr. Krishnamurthy, all I can say is that these fad diets come and go, and they're really not sustainable. Of course, many of them produce rapid weight loss and therefore are highly popular. And then, of course, there's the marketing and the advertising, because it's not just about the diet, it's a whole diet industry, which is $1 million industry, and which everyone, all of us are buying into. But the point is, are they sustainable? Number one. Number two, what about long-term health? So they may help you lose weight in the short term, but what about long-term health? So when you look at things like, coconut oil is good. Well, yes, you can use coconut oil for cooking in small quantities. Doesn't mean you have to drink a whole bottle of coconut oil. And there was anecdotal evidence of coconut oil cures Alzheimer's and things like that. That's just anecdotal, stories. I don't think there is any evidence for coconut oil doing any such thing. So these are all myths that are propagated by the various industries, whether it's a coconut industry or the, the wine industry or whatever it is. And we'll come to that wine question a little later. But the best diet that you're likely to follow is the one that you are able to relate to and that you can internalize. Which means that if you go on this, let's say you are a South Indian, used to eating your traditional idlis and dosas and, your rice and things like that. And then you go into this keto diet with a whole lot of meat and a whole lot of fat and high protein as well. The likelihood of you being able to sustain a diet like that is very, very low. So what is far better is to understand, first of all, what is it that you are inclined towards, and make the necessary modifications within that diet itself. So for instance, even in a South Indian diet, it can be made very healthy, as opposed to the South Indian diet, which has very, very high refined carbs. So if you cut down the quantity of the refined, increase the amount of the lentils and the greens, and increase the amount of the proteins from the dals and the beans, it would be far easier for you to sustain such a diet than to go completely off track and eat something that is foreign to you almost. And these fads like quinoa is the best thing to eat for breakfast because it's high in protein. Yeah, but there is a substitute for quinoa in India, which is amaranth. So let's look at local foods that are much easier to access and which leave a less of a carbon footprint rather than importing things from all over the world. Let's eat local. Let's eat, preferably organically grown, but that's not always available. So we need to look at sustainability as well. And you should think of food not as a diet, but as a lifestyle plan. So, there are no such things as superfoods, for instance. There are some foods that are really good. They are very high in nutrients. They are nutrient dense. So they are very good for you. But just eating that alone to the exclusion of everything else is not going to help. For instance, green tea has been said to be everything. It has antioxidants and all kinds of things, improves longevity, etc., etc. It even increases weight loss. These are the kind of things that are advertised. But green tea, yes, does have many, many positive properties, nutrients that are very good for you. But no, it doesn't it doesn't cause weight loss. Drinking a whole lot of green tea doesn't cause weight loss. Probably the effect of drinking the green tea reduces the intake of other high calorie food. So in that sense, it may cause you to lose weight, but not the tea itself. So, and then some other points to remember is some basic things, basic diet tips, or not diet tips, but basic nutritional tips to remember is the things to avoid are the highly refined foods, highly processed foods, and definitely sugar, high sugar foods. So if you stop eating sugar and processed foods, and also minimize animal products, because from a lifestyle medicine perspective, we do recommend what's called as a whole food plant-based diet, which means that it needs to be mainly plant-centric. So if you eat a whole lot of animal products, they have been found to be pro-inflammatory. So try and reduce it to move along the spectrum, so that you don't eat as much of it as you used to, and that seems to improve metabolic health. And try and eat food as close to the source as possible, which means the more refined it is, the less nutrient dense it is. So rice that is less refined, wheat that is less refined, definitely not processed packaged foods with an expiry date that can sit on the shelf for many, many months. So these are just the simple things. And yes, there are a huge number of myths about food, like there are fat burning foods, for instance. There are no foods that can burn fat. So we need to look at food as something that gives us not just energy, but also improves our health and prevents disease. Therefore, we need to look at the right kind of food to incorporate and stop eating the kind of food that can cause the disease or aggravate the disease. Not look at quick fix solutions, which is what we tend to look at, and which is why these fads and these myths become so popular.
Thank you. I think you've probably touched a lot of points that people were having concerns about in that very short answer. I'm just going to one or two questions in the chat box. This one is for you, Professor Rishi. Work from home, online transactions, digitalization, that's the scenario. How does mindfulness and leadership roles work across different sectors of the employment and human activity? That's from Janaki Ramanathan.
Not sure I understood the question too well. Dr. ESK, can you help me a little bit? What is the...
I think it's about the increasing digitalization, and what that is doing to human activity across different sectors.
Oh, I don't think I have an answer to that question. I mean, at least I haven't studied it in detail. I'm sure it will have some consequences at some point of time or the other. But I think, maybe it's not fair, but I think I'll pass that question. If you have any answer to that, please go ahead. But I don't think I have anything specific to say about that.
I mean, obviously, it's not an area that I specialize in, but what occurs to me every day as a human being is that it's not a level playing field. You pointed out about how many houses were not designed to be the workplace. And so many people in the family all trying to work simultaneously, and and therefore it's no longer a level playing field. And I think everything going digital also takes away the level playing field. I think the people who are most affected are going to be people who are in the small segment of the economy who don't have access to the digital sector as a marketplace. And equally people who can't use the digital marketplace to shop. I think in a sense, therefore, again, it's not a level playing field when there's so much of an emphasis on digitization. And the pandemic prevents us from going out. I mean, that's the way I think about it.
Yes.
There's a question for Dr. Sheila Nambiar from Deepa Damodaran. On the one hand, we have the kids studying online, and then they go and play on their mobiles, and we are all working from home. How can you stop that? How can you put some limits on it? What can you do?
It's a very tough question, and it's I think I'm hearing it more and more from many of my patients as well. This thing about the kids and the screen time, I really don't know what to say about that, because it seems to be, they not only do they need to study online, they also have their social media activities that they have to keep up with. All I can say is that I think parents need to lead by example. You can't be on the computer and on the, except for work, of course, but, on your social media and watching TV all the time and expect kids not to do it, because they will. It's the same thing with food. You eat what you want, but tell the kids they have to lose weight and they can't eat. So you do need to lead by example. But I think also the other way of leading by example is try to play with the kids. Like Dr. Krishnan said, that there's not enough space. I know for many people, it may not happen inside the house, but if possible, to go out for a walk with the kids or go to the park with the dog and the kids. These kind of things where you involve the children in activity or in physical exercise would divert them from this whole social media and screen time, rather than letting them sit around at home. What else do they do at home except time and computers and television?
Fair enough. Professor Hrishikesha, we are in the month of the Gandhi Jayanti, and there was a question about ethics a little earlier. Mahatma Gandhi was famous for his concept of servant leadership. How do you think that is relevant in this particular time that we live in? The post-COVID era, the current culture in the corporate sector?
So, more than the concept of servant leadership, I always like the concept of trusteeship. And I think there are at least some business leaders in India who have been practicing that concept. One person who comes to mind is Azim Premji, for example. He pretty much behaves as he wants others to. Just taking off from what Dr. Sheila was mentioning just now. Azim Premji follows all the tenets which he advocates to others, like, being frugal and not wasting things and all that stuff. So I think he's certainly a person who seems to hold even the corporate and family assets more as a trustee for the coming generations than as someone who's there just to slash and burn and get whatever he can out of it. And I think there have been others as well in the past. So I think that, to my mind, is quite a strong concept even now. We've also seen in recent times several leaders pledging their wealth to philanthropic causes. This is something, for example, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates have been doing in the US, and we have several business leaders in India now, including Azim Premji, who have sort of emulated that example. So I think that's another way in which many of these leaders are signifying that they have sort of some responsibility to the next generation, and that extends beyond the next generation of their own family, but to the next generation of the broader community. So I think these concepts do seem to be quite relevant, and particularly in the environment and sustainability context, the whole question of intergenerational equity and whatever goes along with that, I think those are extremely relevant, and we ignore them at our own peril. So I think these are certainly things. Fortunately, there are some leaders, both in business and outside, who are paying attention to many of these ideas.
Thank you. Quite a few questions on diet in the chat box, Dr. Sheila. There's a question on how many times you need to eat in a day from Balamurugan. A question on fasting and feasting from Sridhar. And a question on whether breakfast is indispensable from Major Narayan. Would you please address the questions on food?
Yeah, how many times you need to eat in a day can be completely individualized. There is absolutely no reason why we need to eat even say 3 times a day if you don't want to. If you follow what is called as the intermittent fast, where you do a 16-hour fast in a feeding window of about 8 hours, which would be about 2 meals, that's perfectly fine. I think it depends on the individual, because there are some people who would prefer to have their breakfast, who would prefer to have 3 meals. One thing I can say is there's certainly no scientific evidence for snacking. There was this whole fad of eat every 2 hours, it increases your metabolism. There's absolutely no scientific research that validates that. So you do need to have a fairly large fasting window for the insulin sensitivity to improve. So this feeding every 2 hours is something that one should refrain from. Should you skip breakfast? What was the question? Is breakfast mandatory? Is it?
Yeah, is it indispensable as was thought to be?
Not necessarily. No, not necessarily. Because if you do an intermittent fast, you will probably go into about 10, 11 a.m. or even go into lunch before you have your first meal. So again, it has to be completely individualized. I don't think there is a general rule for everybody. It depends on your lifestyle, what kind of work you do. If you exercise early in the morning, for instance, you might want to have a good breakfast and then stop eating early in the day. Having said that, with intermittent fasting, for instance, when you have your feeding window earlier in the day rather than later in the day, it seems to be of better benefit. So starting with an early a breakfast and probably a lunch and then winding up by about 4 o'clock is better than starting at 1 o'clock and going on till 8 o'clock. So an earlier window is better. What was the other? Was there another question, Dr.
No, I think you kind of answered all the questions in the. Thank you. Since both of you are busy people, let me ask you to give us your own concepts of what work-life balance is. I'll start with Professor Hrishikesha. What you think of as work-life balance, and then I'll let the doctor have a say as well.
So, I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer that question. I think many people would argue that I don't have too much work-life balance. The fact that I'm sitting in the office at past 7 o'clock in the evening participating in this webinar itself suggests that maybe I don't have too good work-life balance. So, I tend to work a lot of the time. And my wife tells me I work all the time. But anyway, maybe I don't totally agree with that. But I do certainly acknowledge that I work a lot of the time. I don't have very rigid boundaries between my so-called work and other life, and they sort of seem to flow into each other. Again, I don't know if these things are good or bad, but I don't think I'm unduly stressed by that. I do certainly have a more relaxed schedule on the weekend, though I continue to do work. I'm personally not a great one for partying and a whole lot of other, multi-people social activities. So I don't participate much in them. So I don't know. If I look at it from the other point of view, touch wood and touching everything else, most of my health indicators seem to be quite okay. So it doesn't appear as though the way I'm living is, actually harming me in any way, though I certainly shouldn't tempt things by saying things like this, but, so I think, again, I'm tempted to think that it's really something which, again, individuals have to work out for themselves. What is the right work-life balance? Some people, as I said earlier, some people just get very energized by hanging out with a big group of people, and some people don't. So I think it's a lot of it has to do with what is the form of, for example, entertainment that suits you best. And then you need to follow that. So I'm sorry, this is not a very specific or very precise answer, but maybe Dr. Sheila will have a better answer.
For among the very fortunate few for whom work is life and life is work. And as you said, they flow very well from one to another. And I think that's an enviable position to be in, which also explains your health indicators. You're probably not stressed out by the work that you do. Rather, it de-stresses you. Lessons for all of us from there. Dr. Sheila.
Yeah. Dr. Krishnamurthy, I don't know if you can actually call it a work-life balance, because there are times in your work when you have to be completely obsessed with the work. Let's say there's a presentation or there is something coming up. You do need to defocus from your home and focus completely on your work. And then there are times in your home life where you do need to focus a little, and your work may suffer a bit as well. And I think this is actually more likely to be the case for women, because we do have far more responsibility in the house than the men generally do. So this concept of work-life balance can be a bit confusing for people. And in fact, like Dr. Krishnan said, I think I would probably have to also admit that for me also, my life is my work and my work is my life. And being an obstetrician doesn't help, because you're called at all odd times. Babies always decide to come out at the wrong time. So, my work and my life are kind of blurred. The lines are kind of blurred. And fortunately, and like Dr. Krishnan said, because I enjoy my work so much, it doesn't seem to be a stressor. It doesn't seem to be something that intrudes on my well-being. So that way, I think I'm also very, very fortunate to enjoy the work enough for it not to be stressful. So and I think the one way that I can say probably that I balance out whatever stress that may occur either in the work or in the home front is with exercise. Honestly, that has been the one thing that has kept me sane. Allayed anxiety, elevated mood, everything that I have stated in the last couple of questions that you've asked, I've also experienced personally, which is why I am a great proponent of exercise as being very much a part of your life. So for me, it is, my personal life has kind of, like I said, blurred with the work life, and I don't find the need to consciously balance it out all the time. Obviously, sometimes you do need to make the effort this way or that way, but I don't consciously do it at all times. And in fact, I think we seem to have a lot of similarities, Dr. Krishnan and I don't enjoy socializing either. So for me, it's not a late night is something that happens very rarely. So, I'm in bed with a book, which is my way of unwinding. So again, these are all, I think, very individual. People who are extroverts enjoy company and they enjoy social interactions, but introverts like me don't. So we need to understand ourselves a little bit more, and that makes it easier for us to balance this so-called, work and life. I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's the way I see it. So how do you balance your work-life balance, Dr. Krishnamurthy? Let me ask you that question.
So another very blessed person for whom your work is life and life is work. Well, I'll echo that thought, but I have, as I've grown older, become better at identifying the things that I enjoy doing and making sure that they are part of my day. So one thing that gives me immense pleasure is walking my dogs. And so that's something that I have started doing more and more of, more regularly. And in the pandemic, I started feeding the street dogs. And I now know all the street dogs in my locality. I know them by their personalities. I know what they'll want, how they'll behave. So that's been great fun too. So I think, these little pleasures are what take away any little stresses that work brings for most of us. And I see more points in the chat box about, balancing time and work and children. And I think the main thing to say, as Jack Ma reportedly said, I'm not sure if he really said it, but I believe he said that, if you get through 2020, you're okay. I think if you're working from home and getting through each day, no matter how badly or well you're doing it, it's fine. You should pat yourself in the back and be appreciative of yourself for being able to do that, because we surely live in very, very challenging and difficult times, all of us. So I'm going to leave the audience and both of you with a final question. Your prescription for the mindful workplace, because that's what we've been talking about today. So maybe we'll go ladies first. Dr. Sheila, tell us, what is your prescription for the mindful workplace?
You explained what mindfulness was right at the beginning, Dr. Krishnamurthy. It's nothing but being in the present moment without judgment and executing whatever it is that you have to do in the moment. And I think mindfulness is a practice that comes with time, and if you keep doing it over and over again with great deal of consciousness and internalize the process of mindfulness, it happens whether you think about it or not, whether it's at work or at home, just being present in the moment. You know, most of us, and I'm guilty of this too, most of us think that we can multitask, but it's been known that, you know, only a barely less than 5% of people can actually multitask. What we are doing is just sort of, you know, shifting from one task to the other and not really doing them too well either. So over time, I myself have learned that staying focused, doing the thing that you are doing, whatever it is really important. You know, just being conscious and aware and present for the moment, whether it is with a, you know, whether you're talking to a colleague or talking to an employee or talking to a patient or talking to a friend, or, you know, in my case, performing surgery or conducting a delivery or, you know, interviewing a client, just being present, because every moment is precious and that's all we have. You know, we just have that moment with us, and there's no point really, you know, allowing our attention to be diverted from that moment, because it takes away from that moment. Having said that, of course, mind wandering is also good and that's helpful and it helps the brain and all of that. But when you're doing something, especially when you're with somebody, I think just being present is all that is required. It also helps us to be in touch with ourselves, be in touch with what we, you know, what we are thinking. Probably we have some cognitive biases as we have a conversation with somebody. You're able to identify these things much better when you're mindful. You know, you may be looking at things from a different perspective, looking at it through a different kind of lens, and you become conscious of that every time you are mindful. So to me, it's just about being present. And I think our attention is really the biggest gift that we can give somebody. You know, whether it's your partner, your parent, your child, just being present and being attentive is the best gift you can give. And we are all so scattered and so rushed for time, most of the time. Interestingly, this pandemic has actually brought this to the forefront, where we have been forced to be with people, forced to be in small environments, and either you could have benefited from it by being mindful, being present, being conscious, or you could have just been completely stressed out by it. For me, it's been a learning experience, and it's been good actually. It's been good, even though it's been the pandemic. It's been good. All the stressors and everything notwithstanding, you know, dealing with patients with COVID and all of that. But it's been good. Yeah.
Wonderful, Professor Rishikesha.
You know, first of all, I must say upfront that I am no expert whatsoever on mindfulness. And, you know, I think both of you have some expertise in that area. So I'll just say one thing. And I think that since you asked about a mindful workplace, maybe the workplace needs to allow some time for contemplation and reflection.
Also,
I think the most standard workplaces don't. This is one of the reasons why you also don't see a lot of innovation happening, because everybody is so madly trying to reach some target or some deliverable or something of a similar kind. So I think if only we would allow a little contemplation and reflection and not be driven by efficiency metrics of the type I was talking about earlier, where you're trying to track every minute of somebody working at home, I think you will certainly facilitate a mindful workplace.
Wonderful. I'm going to ask Group Captain if there are other questions that have come via social media.
Yeah, number of questions have come, and I think no, maybe I can take one question. It could be addressed to you. We have got a number of questions from YouTube and Facebook. This is a question which has come from Mr. Kaushal from Delhi. I think maybe one of you can take it. This question. I know I am under stress and I can recognize all the obvious symptoms. If this is a time for a complete change of direction in my life, and you also want to know, conflicting priorities often make me feel stressed. How can you resolve them?
Both good but very difficult questions to answer. I always look at two things. One is, stress, emotional stress is a gap between our expectation and our reality. And most of us spend a lot of time trying to modify reality. What's easier to modify is our expectations. So, one should examine what is the expectation, what's the reality, and then probably focus on modifying expectation. The second is the concept of locus of control. Both our speakers today have told us, my life is my work and my work is my life. They're enjoying themselves because they are reveling in what they do. Which also means, therefore, that they feel in control of their circumstances when they are working. If you're in a working situation and you feel that the working situation controls you rather than you control it, then that indicates a need for change, not necessarily of the workplace, but of how you're working. And I think, Professor Krishnan talked about trusteeship. The trusteeship is not just for the leader. The trusteeship is also for each one of us who works in an organization. We have to take the organization as the temple that we serve and ensure that we do everything possible to make it successful. So empathy is not a one-way street where the leader feels the empathy for everybody in the organization. It's a two-way street. Everyone in the organization also needs to feel empathy for the leader and the hardships that the leader is also undergoing. Finally, I saw a very interesting question about the importance of prayer and faith. And I just wanted to, that question is from Mr. Ganeshan. And I just want to make the point that for many people, those moments spent in prayer, if you are so inclined, those are the moments when you're in touch with your inner self and with the higher being. And probably those moments are therefore very, very important. So if you are a believer and you have the habit of praying, then probably that's going to be your most mindful moment, whether it happens either in workplace or at home. So I'm going to I think I've answered the question and I'll leave that there.
Maybe one last question before we close it. I think we almost come to the end of the time. And this is, anyone could answer this. What he wants to know is one of the YouTube viewers. What can employers do now to safeguard the employees' mental well-being on the return to the work, and because they have been used to work from home for a long time, they're going to come back to work. And what are the employees' main concern on the employees' well-being right now in COVID-19? Because there is always a fear among the people to come and work and do something which otherwise they would have to do in performance of the duties. Such. This is the last question, sir. I think each one of you can share your views.
Professor Krishnan, would you like to take this one?
So I'll just speak from my own perspective. I think we have been, in IIM, we've been working sort of from home right since the beginning of the pandemic. Of course, it's somewhat flexible. I mean, if you want to come to office and work, you're welcome. We have the good fortune that most of our offices are sort of independent offices. So most people can work without necessarily coming into close contact with others. But there are still a good number of our employees who don't come to the office. And we are quite happy with that as long as they are able to do their work from wherever they are based. We did try once or twice to get people to at least come in once in a while, just so that their connect with the workplace was not lost. Some people were happy to do that, but others didn't feel quite confident about it. Of course, we've done a lot of things in the workplace itself to make working safer. We've put up shields and barriers and all sorts of things, basically to make people's workplaces more sort of insulated from others. So we've done a fair amount of physical changes to make the workplace safer. But I think it's going to be a challenge. Again, it's going to be a challenge at the individual level, which each of us are going to have to address. My only concern is that there's some people at least who have sort of getting quite unused to the idea of going back to the workplace. And I think some of them are going to face some struggle in getting back. That's what it looks like to me.
Thank you so much, sir. And there's a lot of interest, a lot of questions have come. Over 860 viewers are watching this program today in spite of so many things happening around. And that shows the interest in the subject. People really want to know. Thank you so much, Mr. Hrishikesh Krishna. I know how busy you are today and joining us and patiently answering all the questions till the end. I really appreciate it. And sorry for keeping you till the end of the session. And thank you, Sheila. Thanks to the great network service in Ooty. We are all the time apprehending there's something going to go wrong. Where when you do good things, it never goes wrong. It's always there. And as usual, Dr. Krishnamurthy, thank you so much. And your presence and so beautifully raising the questions which are very, very relevant today and which really brought out the best amongst our panelists. And as a token of our appreciation, we would like to present on behalf of MMA. This is what we do now during the pandemic time. We get the mask done. We go to different NGOs and we work with them. MMA visit a number of people, make them understand that mask wearing is so important for them, make them understand that. And I thought it's a small initiative. Thank you for really agreeing to our proposal to do this on your behalf. Thank you. And all the viewers who are watching the program live, thank you so much for your joining in. I know now it's time for you. May the best cricket team win today. CSK is, I don't know what to tell. Every time I wish them, they're not doing well. This time we'll leave them alone. They will do well. And thank you, Mr. Hrishikesh, and thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Sheila, and all the very best. And stay safe and stay healthy. Till we meet again. Bye-bye and good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye. Good night.
Thank you.